So tea is coming by the time we finish this. Please have it.
His legacy. Each of the following examples shares a When disagreements arise over the meaning of Meher Baba's words, who possesses the authority to determine the correct interpretation? On the one hand, it's important for people to understand the various things that Meher Baba said and did. Contradictory understandings will inevitably come, and such contradictions may become confusing for the average follower. On the other hand, the principle of individual spiritual experience, each person's direct, unmediated relationship with Meher Baba, must also be recognized and valued within certain norms. Now, the second example that has happened in the past is the question of cooperative group formation versus individual paths. Now, the preservation of Meher Baba's legacy requires coordinated collective effort, groups working together with shared purposes, organizations maintaining properties and publications, communities gathering to honor his memory and study his teachings. Yet, Meher Baba insisted that each follower must discover their own unique path to God, conducting what he called, quote, intelligent and purposive experimentation with their own spiritual life. The third example, textual authority versus lived spiritual experience. Which texts definitively represent Meher Baba's teachings? Who decides which texts have greater weight than other texts? Hundreds of hours of talks by various mandali exist, yet often their accounts of the same events differ wildly. Who decides which texts are authoritative? Reliable, authenticated sources that serve as touchstones for understanding Meher Baba's message are essential. Yet, Meher Baba emphasized living spiritual experience over scriptural study, inner realization over intellectual comprehension. And finally, fourth example, unified representation versus decentralized expression. Who speaks for Meher Baba in public contexts? When media, academics, or seekers inquire about the Meher Baba movement, who possesses the authority to represent his message? On the one hand, there is a legitimate need for coherent public representation. Preventing misrepresentation and maintaining as much accuracy as possible about Meher Baba's life and teachings to those unfamiliar with him is essential. On the other hand, there is the principle that every lover of Meher Baba has the right to speak authentically from their own understanding and experience, that no individual or institution can claim exclusive right to represent him. Well, this is just a sampling of the kind of tensions and oppositions that have existed in all past Avataric Advents and have been dealt with in various ways. As their numbers continue to increase through the centuries, how will these issues be addressed within the Meher Baba movement? Meher Baba's institutional design. 4 key principles. Throughout Meher Baba's life, he left countless clues as to how he might want his lovers to consider these kinds of questions. Beyond the oral traditions passed down by his mandali and the written record in the discourses, Lord Meher and elsewhere, Meher Baba also oversaw the development of several institutions charged with preserving his legacy. Three important documents guide these institutions: the Avatar Meher Baba Perpetual Public Charitable Trust Deed, the Meher Spiritual Center Charter, and the Chartered Guidance from Meher Baba for Reorientation of Sufism. If we closely examine these three charters, four consistent principles emerge that Meher Baba included in his institutional design. These are: 1. Do not form a religion. 2. Institutional roles do not confer spiritual authority. 3. Inclusivity. And 4. Independence of groups and organizations. These principles offer clues as to how Meher Baba might want his followers to address the tensions that we've discussed. The first of these principles: not forming a religion. So starting with the trust deed, the trust deed contains the most explicit statement in Schedule 1 about not forming a religion, where it says, quote, "It is emphasized that Meher Baba has no separate religion or cult or community or creed and philosophy separately, except universal love," close quote. This directly addresses his intention to not establish a distinct religious sect, instead emphasizing universal love as the sole organizing principle. The Meher Spiritual Center Charter describes establishing, quote, "a non-sectarian and non-profit religious organization for the dissemination of Meher Baba's teachings without supplanting professed religious convictions or beliefs, but for the enhancement and strengthening of the spiritual life," close quote. This explicitly states that the organization does not seek to replace existing religious affiliations, but to complement them. The term religious organization is there for legal reasons only. And then finally, the Sufism Reoriented Charter states, quote, "Meher Baba is connected with one and all religions, and because each of them teaches the same divine truth and leads to the same one God, he is also detached and above all religions," close quote. This establishes a stance that transcends traditional religious formation, describing Sufism Reoriented as simultaneously connected to all religions, yet detached from all. So then, moving on to the second principle, institutional roles do not confer spiritual authority. In the trust deed, the trustees and the chairman manage, quote, "the routine affairs of the trust," close quote, property, funds, banking, appointments, and administrative rules. There is no suggestion that these offices carry spiritual rank or doctrinal authority. Trustees are chosen by majority vote on non-religious criteria. Again, it states, quote, "without any distinction of caste, creed, race, religion, sex, or nationality," close quote. This, again, underlines their status as administrative stewards rather than spiritual leaders. The Meher Spiritual Center Charter authorizes the corporation to, quote, "designate and appoint such officers, agents, and other employees as may be considered necessary or advisable to carry on the purposes and activities of the center," clearly framing these roles as instrumental to running the organization, but not as spiritual offices. And finally, the Sufism Reoriented Charter contains really the most direct statement on this theme in Section 7, where it says, quote, "privileges and prerogatives born of divine illumination and of realization of truth could never be subject to statutory provisions of any kind. Where there is neither divine illumination nor realization of God, there should never be any constitutional or organizational authority for the sustenance of any such privileges and prerogatives," close quote. This establishes clearly a principle that spiritual authority cannot derive from an organizational position. Only actual spiritual attainment confers spiritual authority, and such authority cannot be institutionalized through organizational structures. Well, the third principle, which is in all of these documents, is inclusivity. All three charters contain emphatic statements of inclusivity. A core phrase that appears repeatedly and that we've already quoted is, quote, "irrespective of caste, creed, race, religion, sex, or nationality," close quote. This represents not merely legal language, but a fundamental principle. And the fourth and final principle that I'd like to draw from these documents, as I say, we can draw probably many principles, but these four really stand out. The fourth and final one is independence of groups and organizations. Each of these three charters defines its own organization without establishing hierarchical relationships among Meher Baba institutions. Rather than creating a centralized authority structure, the charters establish autonomous organizations that serve their own distinct purposes while honoring Meher Baba's message. So these four principles work together as a system. They prevent the accumulation of power in institutional positions while maintaining structures necessary for preservation. They ensure that inclusivity prevents sectarianism, while independence prevents centralized control. Together, they create what might be called structures of service rather than structures of authority. They also serve as a clear example of principles that Meher Baba himself felt were important enough to include in the legal documents of organizations established in his name during his lifetime. Mastery in servitude. Above all else, Meher Baba emphasized over and over again that lived spiritual principles, a commitment to loving God and to living the life of the Spirit, were more important than any organization or legal document. Meher Baba asked his followers to preserve his legacy through cooperative effort while not creating a religion and while each person simultaneously follows their own spiritual path. So we've briefly explored how this mandate necessarily creates tensions around authority, collective action, textual interpretation, and public representation. What Meher Baba expects of his followers is genuinely difficult. It is perhaps unprecedented in religious history. He has given his followers a challenge that cannot be solved through traditional religious mechanisms. The very tools that have worked for past religious movements are the same ones that he has criticized for their failures in the development of past religious systems. One day in the early 1920s in Manzili Meen, Meher Baba decided that the group should have a motto. After some discussion, Baba himself offered the slogan, "Mastery in Servitude," to which the whole group immediately agreed. That motto is now above the door of Meher Baba's tomb shrine at Mehrabad. It would seem that, as the Meher Baba movement continues to grow, that motto will become more and more important, more and more central to the movement if the movement is to thrive in a way that might please Meher Baba. The motto, "Mastery in Servitude," points toward the essential resolution of the implicit tensions that we've been exploring. Mastery in servitude suggests a way of being that combines competence with humility and effectiveness with self-effacement. It describes institutional roles that serve rather than rule, expertise that enables rather than controls, structures that support rather than constrain. As Baba says in one of his discourses, quote, "When the master is seen in his capacity of rendering service to humanity, the aspirant is quick to catch that spirit because of his love for the master. Contact with the master is also helpful in imbibing the spirit of cooperation, which the aspirants can cultivate easily because of their common love for the master. They serve because the master wants it. They do the master's work, not their own. And they do it not of their own accord, but because they have been entrusted with that work by the master. Therefore, they are all free from any ideas of individualistic claims, rights, or privileges, being keen only about the master's work, ready to serve his cause to the best of their abilities when they are called upon to do so, and equally ready to hand over that work to another co-aspirant if he or she can do it better." Close quote. Well, some may feel that Meher Baba will take care of everything without any special human effort. Yet, as the numbers grow, and as it has happened with past Avataric movements, there will be social, cultural, and material rewards available to those who can influence large groups of Meher Baba's followers. When there are many who feel the need to be led, leaders will appear, sometimes motivated by purposes other than pure service. The challenge for anyone interested in preserving Meher Baba's legacy is to balance true humility and self-effacement with mastery and competence in service. To do all this while remaining true to the highest vision of spiritual life that Meher Baba embodied and to which he repeatedly called his followers requires profound sincerity and integrity of purpose. If these tensions that we've described can be held consciously, if institutions can be built rooted in service rather than authority, if inclusivity can be maintained while honoring individual paths, if Meher Baba's legacy can be preserved without creating a religion, then a movement may continue to emerge which might truly please him. The questions raised here have no easy answers. They require ongoing discussion, experimentation, and, above all, sincere affection for Meher Baba and for one another. How best to navigate the unprecedented tensions described here remains to be seen. What can be said is that conscious awareness of these dynamics, combined with the institutional safeguards Meher Baba himself has included in his charters, provides his followers with resources that previous Avataric movements have never had. The outcome will depend upon choices yet to be made by the individuals and institutions who dedicate themselves to preserving Meher Baba's legacy down through the coming centuries.
Your key unlocks the universe. You give the drink for which you're thirsty. You hold the power to heal all hurt.
Now we have a tea break, and after 10 minutes, we again assemble to have further proceedings. Please.